Such an honor to be with you this morning. Today, I'd like to talk about the ego or the separate self and its roots in our psyche and what we can do to see this more clearly in ourselves. Excuse me. It's kind of an odd thing to talk about because it doesn't actually exist. It's an assumed limitation on the only self there is, aware being, which is what all of us share. And that's why every authentic spiritual tradition talks about effacement of this activity. The first shall be last and the last first, and so on. But even when we understand that and genuinely want to follow it, we can get caught, and it can seem very hard to do that. So why is this? And what is the remedy we need? I'm going to try to get into that. Each of us says I hundreds of times a day. And the real I, the real you is here. We've investigated that in previous talks I've given. And actually, your I refers to the portion of infinite awareness that has always been borne your name for your entire life. And Sufis call that the Ruh, or the spirit. And that I is real, and that's your true identity. And it exists outside of time and space because it's not a thing or a noun. It's not an object to be known by the mind. It's the infinite, timeless, pure knowing of your experience. Nonetheless, most of us do not see that I clearly because it's become mixed with thoughts, experiences, memories, images, which have been woven together into the idea that there is someone living inside your head, separate from everyone and everything else. And that sort of wrinkle in our pure awareness becomes conditioned with agendas and strategies and so forth that hold it in place. So that's the separate self we imagine ourselves to be. And when that self is functioning on steroids, we call it narcissism. Narcissism is defined as the personality trait that's characterized by an exaggerated sense of self, sense of importance, and a need for admiration, and lack of empathy for others. And spiritually, it's really just a compensation for the seeming absence of the authentic self. The narcissist remembers the real self as if an echo of something missing, and then they go looking for it through all kinds of activities, relationships, and trying to fill that hole within. So to kind of open this up more, I'll tell a Sufi story that my Murshid often told. Moses is walking up the mountain to go talk to God, and he passes the house of the local rabbi who's sitting on the porch, and he's got all of his ceremonial garb on, and his long white beard is perfectly in place, every whisker. And he calls out to Moses, Moses, when you talk to God, find out if he has anything to tell me. And Moses kind of doesn't even pay attention, just continues on up the mountain. Well, as you know, with jokes like this happens several times. And then the next day, Moses is walking up the mountain, and the rabbi calls out, Moses, does God have anything to tell me? And Moses looks at him and says, as a matter of fact, yes. He says that you're always thinking about your beard. And And the rabbi flies into a rage and starts tearing his clothes and pulling his beard out by the roots. And God looks down at Moses and says, "See, he's still thinking about his beard." Ain't that how it is? So, over the centuries, the Sufis have made quite a study of the illusory self and the structure of narcissism. And there are different systems, but the most common denotes 7 layers of maqam, 7 levels, maqam, M-A-Q-U-M. And these are like stations of the ego or of the self. And it's kind of a spiritual set point. It's an indicator of how caught in the illusion of separation we are. I'll just give you a little bit of the flavor of this. So the nafs amara is kind of the lowest level. It's the greedy, voracious, commanding self that drives really toward degradation. And to this one, everyone and everything is an object to be corrupted or consumed in its quest to feel complete. So it's pure lust for money, fame, sex, and so on. So next up, we have the nafs lalama, the blaming self, which is consumed with criticizing self and others, complaining and contrasting. And this level of self is blinded in the heart. If we're blinded in the heart, we're unable to take responsibility for anything and anyone. The third level is the nafs bolima, the inspired self. So that sounds a little better, doesn't it? It's starting to open up. This heart has some more space in it to actually receive some guidance. But if there's still too many impressions, that guidance can be misinterpreted and lead to all kinds of trouble. So I want to enumerate all these levels, but we get up to, through the contented self and the gratified self, the nafs sophia, the complete self, signifies a pure soul, purified of identification with the impressions creating separation. And this self can experience true ecstasy and freedom and be a force of good. So we all have some of these levels functioning in us all the time, But the Sufis kind of view this as like a staircase. And, simply put, it means how much are we still thinking about our beard? That's what it comes down to. And along the way, we can even experience what is called a hal, H-A-L, which is a temporary spiritual state where we just suddenly feel freedom and joy in this journey toward God. And it can be after a beautiful day in the woods or a meditation. Rupert Spira calls these free samples. Free samples from God of the higher maqam to keep you on your way, toward, kind of like, okay, I got still a little bit to figure out here. So, where do these impressions come from, that are covering our hearts and keeping us in this, web of being caught? Well, for the Sufis, there are two main, and Sufi psychology recognizes two main impressions: the family whole and the argument with God. The family whole refers to a tear or wounding in the fabric of our sense of self, usually from our family of origin, where we experienced a lack of intimacy, not being seen, being neglected, or abused. And depending upon the impression, the Sufi student is given practices to root up the personal or narcissistic hold that has on the personality. Because we can actually grab onto something that's painful because it's familiar and we've always known it. And so letting go of the tight fist around that is spiritual growth. That's letting go. The argument with God has to do with feeling so beaten down or defeated by life that we feel abandoned by life itself or by the divine. And we may have a huge chip on our shoulder about that. And ironically, the only remedy for the argument with God is receiving the love of God, which can be a huge leap for someone in this state. So, given all that, what can we do about our maqam, our spiritual set point, to raise it up? Basically nothing. It's set by divine law. It's often by things we cannot see and understand because we're so absorbed in trying to get it right or get ourselves right. It really is about nothing, as Meister Eckhart said, quote, "Since it is God's nature not to be identical to anything other than itself, we must come to the state of being nothing in order to be one with God's nature." So this is why spiritual traditions give various practices of meditation that lead us to the experience, not just that we're becoming nothing, but we're already nothing and always have been nothing. As an intermediate step, though, we can soften our being and just take a breath and look at this. I want to suggest a practice that can actually bypass all these filters that we have, biases in looking at ourselves. And the practice is just noticing. Just noticing is a main practice in therapist Rick Carson's book, Taming Your Gremlin, which is a really humorous book about how to get out of your own way, is what he calls it. This separate self wants to ensnare us in all kinds of activities, especially in practices and efforts to get rid of it. It's like the story of Burr Rabbit and the Tar Baby. You start throwing punches at that ego, you're going to get helplessly mired in it. You can't really take on your ego as a project. So Rick Carson says it's better to just notice. Don't look directly at your ego, but just notice it as if with your peripheral vision. Noticing is very powerful because we see in an instant, all at once, the whole picture. Just pause right here and just notice your experience right now. Do you catch anything you were missing in just the moment before? A great deal can be communicated and known at a glance. In just noticing, suddenly we see with no judgment, no filter, no agenda, no point of view, no time, no space. So just noticing happens at the level of awareness that can be described of being aware of being aware. What is it that's aware of awareness? Awareness itself is aware. Awareness recognizes experience and instantly reveals everything directly known about it. So just noticing has the perfume of nothing, no time, and no one. There's no one who notices, there's just noticing. When you start to play with this amazing faculty of ourself, you may see that just noticing supersedes and undermines the thinking and perceiving mind that we normally attribute to the someone living in our head. And that activity becomes just more of what's noticed. Awareness, or the non-entity that just notices, is always present prior to any thought or idea we might have about how to have a better experience in the future or a better self. If we're curious and we're willing to follow this insight, it can lead to a revelation about who we are and what we believe life is. Adyashanti calls this a checkmate when we realize that anything we might do to change our experience or to attain to something in the future is tripped up by being aware or just noticing. Thus, just noticing can be a revelation. Revelation from the Latin revelare, to lay bare. When our raw experience is laid bare in the clear light of awareness, we're learning. The mind is evolving. The body is letting go. We may actually be getting in line for another free sample from God. So, as my Sufi teacher used to say, we have to lie down in front of the door we want to go through. We can't take this on directly. That portal is the sense of I am that is revealed in just noticing. I'll play this out one more way. Let's assume for the moment that I'm angry. I'm really steamed up about something. If I just notice that, what's present? What do I notice? There's awareness, first of all. That's the context. I have some sensations. Feeling maybe of heat. My breathing may be a little irregular. Maybe even a little shaky. But is there someone who is angry? Can I find that one who is angry? That association is created by thought. It's just a thought that there's someone who's angry. So this noticing doesn't include the angry person. In fact, just noticing starts to pull the plug on the seeming reality of that separate self who is angry. It's shown up to be a kind of mask or a defensive activity or a cover over something else. So, to start to sum some of this up then, our calm or spiritual station is really a barometer of how much we have shed, how much we've let go of. And this is what all the traditions describe as surrender, or letting go and letting be, or taking the backward step. This is where we begin. Don't try to engage or discipline your ego, and that's just what it wants, lots of attention. See it, notice it, keep noticing, and really realize that you are really just the knowing of that. That's the beginning of a journey of transformation. Just noticing can actually become a meditation that is what you are rather than something you're doing. And then being a person in the world is something you do. And flip the thing. Meditation, or knowing our experience, is something we are. Another point would be, do make fun of your brain. Draw Make jokes about it. Give it a goofy name. Own the absurdity of it. That de-escalates its importance. And narcissism really hates being made fun of. Rather would hide. And ultimately, just noticing lays bare our experience. And it's just another name for being aware of being aware. That's the root or spirit of the Sufis. And, just as a reminder about that real self, here's Hazrat Khan. The soul has no birth, no death, no beginning, no end. Sin cannot touch it, nor can virtue exalt it. Wisdom cannot open it up, nor can ignorance darken it. It has been always, and always it will be. This is the very being of human beings, and all else is its cover, like a globe on the light. The soul's unfoldment comes from its own power, which ends in breaking through the ties of the lower planes. It is free by nature and looks for freedom during its captivity. All the holy beings of the world have become so by freeing the soul, its freedom being the only object there is in life. So, just noticing lays bare the reality of the soul, pure awareness. And taking our stance as aware knowing is the pathless path. We're discovering our true identity as aware presence or free spirit. As Rumi says, I see so deeply within myself, not needing my eyes, I can see everything clearly. Why would I want to bother my eyes again? Now that I see the world through his eyes.